The night my husband called me a disgrace, a server slid a $4,000 check beside my water glass like a quiet eviction notice. He laughed with his rich friends, lifted his coat, and left me counting breaths, not dollars, as Crystal and Whispers crowded the table. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. I live in Austin, Texas, the part where the glass towers lean over the river and valet stands glow like small lighthouses. The restaurant was one of those places where the bread has a story and the waiter says curated. We were in a private room with a wall of wine bottles and a view of Congress Avenue. Caleb said, "Don't embarrass me tonight." He adjusted the French cuffs I ironed that afternoon and gave me a smile that meant behave. He introduced me as my wife, Evelyn, like a footnote. The men and women at the table wore success like armor, watches heavy enough to dent a piano, laughter that moved in moneyed waves. By dessert, the talk turned from valuations to vacations. Someone joked that I didn't fit the brand because I wore a blue thrift store dress I loved. Caleb smiled too widely and said, "She's trying." Then his friend ordered another bottle of wine worth a car payment. The server placed the check in a leather book by my water, not his. The total stared at me. $4,000 even. Caleb stood, lifted his coat, and said, "You've humiliated me enough for one night." He kissed the air by my head and walked out. The door eased shut behind him like a verdict. But then I looked at the server, a young woman with tired eyes. The room went softer, like carpets do when people look away. I remembered rent due in 2 weeks, my Honda payment, my mother's inhaler refill. The check didn't care. It was a number shaped like a cliff. "Run it on this," I said. I slid my credit union card across the linen. My hand didn't shake. The card did when it hit the folder. The server carried it to the POS by the bar. Silence gathered like dust. The card approved, the receipt printed with a polite sigh. I signed and kept the itemized copy. Appetizers like jewels, 10 ribeyes, 2 tomahawks, 3 bottles, 1 a Napa cab they called library. Tax, service, a neat 4,000. I folded the paper into my clutch like a small weapon and went to the bathroom, where the mirror reflected a stranger with steady eyes. Except, on the ride home, I looked up the restaurant's email confirmation I'd seen on our shared laptop that morning. Caleb had booked the private room weeks ago. The host email, forwarded to me accidentally, listed him as primary. My email was secondary contact in case we need to confirm arrival. There it was, in polite black and white. Host Caleb Maddox. Minimum spend, $3,500. Credit card authorization, on file ending in 0021. I was the one who signed in the end, but he had put his card down to hold the room. He'd set the trap and walked away. I was the net. I am a bookkeeper by trade. Numbers make sense when people don't. At home, I set the receipt on our kitchen table, the one we bought used from Facebook Marketplace for $75. I opened my laptop. I pulled bank records. The restaurant's authorization was a $1 pre-auth on his business card 3 days earlier. He'd planned everything, including the exit line. One problem, planning leaves footprints. The next morning, March 15th, 2024, I called the restaurant and asked for the events coordinator. I expected attitude. I got a woman named Andrea with a voice that said she had seen worse. "Can you email me a copy of the event agreement?" I asked. The host misdirected the check, and I need accurate documentation for an internal reimbursement. "Internal reimbursement," she repeated, like she was tasting the phrase. "What's the host name?" I gave her Caleb's. I gave the date and the room. She pulled it up. "I can email the agreement and the signed banquet event order," she said. "It shows the host, the minimum, the terms." 10 minutes later, the PDF landed. Host, Caleb. Secondary contact, me. Terms, host responsible for all charges, 72-hour cancellation, card on file only for guarantee, not final payment. I saved it. I printed it. I highlighted. Then I built a folder with tabs, contract, receipt, photos, calendar invite, text screenshots, until Caleb texted at 10:43 a.m. "You were out of line last night. That bill is on you. Consider it tuition." I replied with one sentence. "Return $4,000 to our joint account by March 18 at 5 p.m. He sent a laughing emoji. Then, "You don't understand the game. Investors don't want needy." He wrote another line. "You're a disgrace. Words bruise if you let them." I didn't. I opened a new document and typed demand letter in the corner to keep my head centered. I wrote like a ledger. I laid out the facts, date, place, amount. I attached the contract showing him as host. I attached the receipt I paid under duress to avoid a public scene he orchestrated. I cited what my research called waste of community property, a concept that said a spouse cannot intentionally dissipate funds to harm the other. I didn't need statute numbers, I needed clarity. I printed the letter, signed it, and mailed it certified to his office and our home. I emailed a copy to his work email marked "Read Receipt Requested." I gave him a clock, 10 days. Pay $4,000 back to our joint account and send written confirmation. Otherwise, I would file for temporary orders with the court to freeze major transfers and seek reimbursement. But then, on March 17th, I saw a transfer from our joint account to a new checking account titled "Only in His Name." The amount was $42,000. That figure didn't drift, it slammed. He was moving reserves we'd built together, my freelance invoices, his draws, to a pocket without my name. I drove to the Travis County Law Library downtown. I asked the clerk for the packet on temporary restraining orders in family cases. I sat at a wooden table under a fluorescent hum and filled out forms I never thought I'd touch. I wrote what happened in simple sentences. I attached my exhibits with sticky notes. The librarian showed me where to put March 18, 2024, as the date I wanted the court to consider signed notice complete. At 3:10 p.m., I filed a petition for divorce and a request for a temporary restraining order that froze any transfer over $500 without my written consent. I asked the court to order reimbursement of the $4,000 dinner charge to the joint account and require him to maintain status quo on bills. I asked for a date for a temporary orders hearing. I paid the fee, $350 on my card. It felt like buying a key. Except, Caleb called when the process server handed him the papers at his co-working space. "You didn't," he said. His voice sounded like a wall. "I did," I said. "You have a hearing date, March 29 at 9 a.m. Bring your numbers." He said a string of words I won't repeat and hung up. Minutes later, a new transfer appeared on my banking app, flagged pending. He was trying to move another $12,500. The bank froze it when they received the TRO. A messenger from his office emailed a question that tasted like panic. "What is the scope of this order?" The scope is in the word order. The night before the hearing, I ironed a navy dress. I printed 3 binders, one for me, one for the judge, one for Caleb, tabs labeled in pencil. I didn't dramatize, I built a trail. On March 29th, the courtroom's air felt kept. The judge read fast like a person used to sorting signal from noise. Caleb came in with a blazer and a face practiced in confidence. He sat at the other table with a lawyer he found after 2 frantic days. The lawyer introduced himself and asked for a continuance. The judge looked at the clock. "We're set," she said. "Let's hear the facts." I stood and spoke like I was reading a grocery list. On March 14, at the Townsend and Rye, my husband hosted a dinner for business associates. He told me not to embarrass him. He left me with a $4,000 check. I paid it to avoid a public scene. He refused to reimburse me. 4 days later, he transferred $42,000 from our joint account to a separate account and attempted another transfer of $12,500 after being served. I attached the restaurant contract listing him as host and the receipt with my signature. I handed up Exhibit A. The judge read the host's name. She underlined it with a finger. She read my demand letter and the bank screenshots. Caleb's lawyer said words like misunderstanding and optics. He said the dinner was brand building and therefore a marital opportunity. He said she insisted on paying. The judge held up the contract. "Host responsible for all charges," she read. The host did not pay. Then the judge signed the temporary orders. She ordered Caleb to deposit $4,000 into our joint account by 5 p.m. that day. She ordered him to return the $42,000 he moved within 3 business days. She enjoined him from moving any funds over $500 without my written consent. She ordered him to pay $1,200 a month in temporary support starting April 1st and $1,500 toward my legal costs incurred after filing, even though I'd prepared most of it myself and used a legal aid clinic's advice for free. The clerk handed me a stamped copy that felt heavier than paper. But then, the fallout bled into his other world. His company, North Loop Logistics LLC, had an advisory board that liked clean narratives. 2 days after the hearing, I received a message from Andrea at the restaurant. She'd read the outcome because Caleb's friend had tried to dispute a charge on one of the bottles and dragged the restaurant into the story. Andrea had forwarded my demand letter to their general manager to close the loop. "Do you mind if I send your letter to the person who booked the room under business pretense?" she asked. "You already have," I said. She laughed softly. "We hate being props," she said. "Good luck." I didn't plan the next part. It arrived. One of Caleb's investors, who had sat at the table drinking the library cab, emailed me. He apologized for the scene. Then he wrote a line I read 3 times. If he's willing to stage manage a spouse for a brand moment, we need to revisit governance. He asked if I would share my binders with the company's counsel in confidence before their April 8 board meeting. He said the word misappropriation like a person testing a glass for cracks. I didn't want to scorch earth. I wanted my money back and my name back, so I wrote a measured reply. I sent redacted pages, the contract with host name, my receipt, the temporary orders. I never accused him of crimes. I described behaviors and dates. I wrote, please address governance questions internally. My interest is limited to compliance with the court's orders. Except, Caleb showed up at our house on April 3 to pick up his suits. The front yard smelled like rosemary and sun. He stood in the doorway with a garment bag and said, you've ruined me. You're late on your deadline, I said. The $42,000 isn't back. He looked at the camera mounted above our porch, one of his toys, and said nothing. He left. That afternoon, the bank app showed a deposit, $42,000 returned. The $4,000 had arrived the day of the hearing. A cashier's check he slid across a table like it was hot. Numbers clicked into place. My shoulders unclenched a fraction. But then, on April 8th, while I was reconciling invoices at my desk, an email with a PDF attachment arrived from North Loop's counsel. The subject line, resolution. The document used corporate language that felt bloodless and precise. Caleb was suspended as CEO pending a review of expense controls and governance. He retained his ownership units. The company adopted a new policy, no personal dinners expensed or staged as business. All expenses over $500 required a second signatory. There was a second attachment, a draft separation and release agreement for me and Caleb to sign before mediation. It required him to acknowledge in writing that he had orchestrated the dinner, left me with the bill, and used marital funds in a way the court had barred. In exchange for my agreement not to share the resolution document publicly, he would pay me a lump sum of $15,000 at mediation toward my share of marital property, separate from final division, and he would transfer the title of the Honda to me free and clear. I sent the draft to the legal aid clinic attorney who'd help me with my forms. She used a red pen made of questions. We tweaked dates, tightened language, and added one sentence I wanted. Respondent shall send written apologies to the Townsend and Rye events coordinator and the server on duty, acknowledging his conduct and tipping $500 to the server through the restaurant's payroll to be distributed to her. On April 15th, in a neutral room with a bowl of peppermints, we signed. The mediator had a voice like wind through blinds. Caleb wore defeat in his posture and defiantly polished shoes. He signed the check, $15,000. He signed the apology letters. He slid a money order for $500 to the restaurant, which Andrea later confirmed they passed to the server. He stared at the table when I stood to leave. Disgrace, I said softly, trying the word on like a sweater you return. That word belongs to you now, not me. He looked up, ready to fire, and found no target. I took my copy of the agreement and walked out into the Texas light that makes even the parking lots look honest. Until the last echo came from a place I didn't expect, my inbox again, a week later. The investor who had written before sent a brief note. Board voted, he wrote. New interim CEO. We'll buy out a portion of Caleb's units over the next 6 months, per the formula in the operating agreement. He included a number they planned to pay him. Less than he bragged about, more than many earn in years. Life doesn't always zero out. It balances the books it can. I sold the thrift store dress to a woman who messaged me with a string of hearts. I wore a simple black one to my mother's birthday in May. We sat at a picnic table at Zilker Park with tacos stacked like colorful paperweights. I told her the abbreviated version. She held my hand and said, "You are not a number." I told her numbers make people behave. We laughed and watched a dog chase a red frisbee like a dream he believed in. I kept the receipt from the night of the dinner in a folder, not as a wound but as a map. When I think about that room now, I remember the wine wall and the way the server looked at me with a question she didn't want to ask. I think about the quiet sound a pen makes on thermal paper, how a signature can look like surrender and be a promise instead. Because the truth is simple. He tried to make my name small by making the check large. He tried to turn money into a public whip. I answered with steps anyone could take. Document, demand, file, serve, show up, sign. The judge's orders were numbers that carried weight: $4,000 returned, $42,000 back. $1,200 monthly until division. $1,500 fees, $500 to the person who had to carry the folder to my water glass that night. There were days I wanted thunder. There were hours I imagined speeches I'd never give. In the end, the best revenge wasn't a speech. It was arithmetic with consequences. At night, I sleep without that old coil in my stomach that hummed when he entered a room. In the morning, I reconcile accounts for 3 small businesses that actually pay their vendors on time. I breathe easier when the mail comes. I keep 1 pen by the door, 1 by my bed, 1 in my bag. Not because I'm afraid, because I know where the lines go now. Sometimes, crossing the Congress Avenue Bridge at dusk, I look up at the towers and think about the night he announced to a room that I was a disgrace. The word lost its charge when the court stamped its orders and the funds moved back. When the apology went to the hands that carried the check. The city looks the same. I don't. I learned that you can be small and still move 4 numbers in sequence that change more than money. I learned that humiliation dissolves when you answer it with paper and time. And when a server sets something heavy by your water, and a room looks away, you can pick it up, sign your name, and transform it into a starting point. The napkins were white that night. The ink was blue. The final total was $4,000. What I paid then bought more than a dinner. It bought the ledger where I wrote an ending.